Amelie woke up on her 25th birthday with a heart full of hope. She imagined her family waiting for her with hugs, laughter, and love, just like when she was younger. But when she walked into the grand dining room of the Mbeki mansion, everything was cold and quiet. Her mother's sharp eyes and her father's stiff posture said it all before they even spoke. The warmth she expected was gone. Her father cleared his throat and said in front of everyone, "Amelie, you're old enough now. From today, you're on your own." His words cut deeper than any knife. Her mother added, "You've wasted our money studying art. It's time you learn to live without our help." The room went silent for a moment before her cousin laughed. That sound echoed in her mind like a cruel melody. Amelie looked at them all, people who were supposed to love her, and saw only pride and mockery. Still, she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She smiled, pushed her half-eaten cake aside, and said softly, "Thank you for the reminder." Then she stood up, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. As she walked out of the mansion, she didn't cry. Not one tear. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this moment, their rejection, would be the start of something they'd never see coming. Music filled the grand hall, soft and elegant, but to Amelie it sounded like noise. Her birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration, yet the air around her felt heavy, fake smiles and whispered gossip hanging over the table. She sat quietly, her hands folded on her lap, hoping maybe someone would say something kind. But then her brother stood up, a glass of champagne in his hand, and cleared his throat with a smirk. "A toast," he said loudly, looking right at her. Everyone turned toward him. "To freedom from freeloaders." For a moment, Amelie didn't understand. Then laughter erupted around her. Her parents smiled. Her relatives clapped. Her heart sank. Her brother continued talking, pretending it was a joke, but every word hit her like a slap. The same people who once cheered for her achievements were now laughing at her pain. Her father raised his glass too, chuckling as he said, "It's time we all moved forward." Her mother nodded proudly, adding, "Let's see how long you last without our money." The room roared with laughter again, glasses clinking, music rising louder, as if the cruelty of the moment deserved applause. Amelie sat there, frozen, her chest tightening with every second. She wanted to scream, to ask why, but she knew there was no point. These were her parents, her family. And in that moment, she realized she didn't belong to them anymore. So she smiled instead. A small, calm smile that hid everything breaking inside her. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the marble floor, and every eye turned to her. She didn't say a word. She looked at her brother, then at her parents, and finally at the table full of people who once claimed to love her. "Enjoy your freedom," she said softly. Then she walked out, leaving behind the laughter that had turned into poison. Outside, the night air was cold, brushing against her cheeks as she stepped through the mansion gates for the last time. The stars above Nairobi were faint but steady, and she looked up at them, feeling a strange mix of pain and peace. Her mother's words still echoed in her mind, "Let's see how long you last without our money." Amelie whispered back to herself, "You'll regret this." Her heels clicked against the driveway as she walked toward the empty road. She didn't know where she would go or what she would do next, but she knew one thing, she would never crawl back. They had taken her pride, but they couldn't take her strength. That night, as she disappeared into the darkness, something inside her changed forever. It wasn't just the end of a birthday. It was the end of a chapter, the moment Amelie Mbeki stopped being their burden and started becoming her own power. The nights were long and cold in the outskirts of Nairobi. Amelie lay on her friend Zuri's small couch, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The once sheltered daughter of the Mbeki family was now just another face in the city, blending in with strangers who carried their own quiet struggles. Every morning, before the sun rose, she tied her apron and headed to the little coffee shop where she worked. The smell of roasted beans and the hiss of the espresso machine became her daily rhythm. She smiled at customers, wiped tables, and carried trays until her hands ached. Then she worked another shift in the evenings, cleaning offices for people who reminded her of her parents, polished, proud, and blind to those who served them. Some nights, when she got back, she would sit quietly by the window, clutching a small brown envelope that her grandmother had left her before she died. She'd never opened it. She told herself she would wait for the right moment, though deep down, she feared what it might contain. Her grandmother, Nandi Mbeki, had always been the only one who believed in her art, her dreams, her heart. Losing her had been harder than losing her parents' love. One night, after a long day at work, Amelie felt her body trembling with exhaustion. The world felt too heavy. Tears burned her eyes, and she whispered to herself, "Maybe Grandma was the only one who ever saw me." Her hands shook as she finally picked up the envelope. It had her name written in her grandmother's delicate handwriting, slightly faded with time. Slowly, she tore it open. Inside were papers, old, official, and stamped with seals she didn't understand at first. But as she read through them, her breath caught. They were ownership documents. Her grandmother, Nandi Mbeki, had owned 40% of Mbeki Holdings, the same company her parents bragged about as their empire. Amelie blinked, reading the numbers over and over, not believing what she saw. There was also a short handwritten note, "My dearest Amelie, when the world turns its back on you, remember that part of this legacy is yours. Stand tall. You were never small." Her tears fell freely now, not from pain but from something stronger, realization. The company that had funded her parents' arrogance, the one they had built their lives around, existed because of her grandmother's shares. And now, those shares belonged to her. Amelie sat still for a long moment, her heart pounding. The girl who had once been laughed out of her own birthday party was now holding proof that she was more than they ever believed. She smiled for the first time in months, a soft, quiet smile that carried both peace and power. From that moment on, Amelie knew her story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. 6 months had passed since Amelie had walked away from her family's cruelty. In that time, she had rebuilt herself from the ground up. She had met with lawyers, studied business, and learned everything about Mbeki Holdings, the same company her parents once used to make her feel small. Each night, she reminded herself of her grandmother's note, "You were never small." Now, she was ready to prove it. That evening, the Mbeki mansion was glowing with gold lights, filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. It was the company's grand anniversary, an event that attracted top investors, politicians, and journalists. Everyone who mattered in Nairobi's business world was there. The red carpet stretched from the driveway to the giant entrance, and photographers swarmed the guests as they arrived in designer suits and sparkling gowns. Then, a sleek black car stopped in front of the mansion. When the door opened, Amelie stepped out. She wore a stunning emerald green gown that shimmered under the flashing lights, her natural curls framing her face like a crown. The crowd turned to look. Cameras clicked. Whispers spread fast, wasn't that the daughter they threw out? Her parents stood at the top of the staircase, smiles frozen as their daughter walked toward them, calm and confident. Her mother's voice broke through the noise, sharp and cold. "You weren't invited," she hissed, trying to sound in control. Amelie smiled politely, her calmness unsettling everyone. "I know," she said softly. Then she turned to the security guard beside her and handed him a sealed envelope. "Please make sure my parents get this," she said. The guard delivered it straight to her father. Confused, he tore it open. His face drained of color as he read the first lines. It was a legal notice, ownership transfer documents. He looked up, his voice trembling. "What is this?" Amelie stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. "It's official," she said. "As of today, I'm the new chairperson of Mbeki Holdings." The hall went silent. Every camera pointed at her now. Her father's hands shook, and her mother's smile vanished completely. "That's impossible," her mother whispered. You don't belong here. Amelie looked her straight in the eye. You're right, she said. I didn't belong here before. But now, I own 40% of this company. The same company you built on Grandma's name, and forgot about. Gasps spread across the crowd. Investors turned to each other, whispering. Amelie didn't wait for her parents to respond. She simply smiled, nodded at the stunned guests, and began walking toward the stage where the company banner hung behind the microphone. Every step she took echoed through the marble floor like a promise. That night, the same mansion that once humiliated her became the place where she reclaimed her power. And this time, the only voice that mattered was hers. The room fell silent as the lawyer in a crisp black suit walked up to the stage, carrying a thin folder. The party lights dimmed, and all eyes turned toward him. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice echoing through the grand hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to make an announcement on behalf of Mbeki Holdings. He opened the folder slowly, his tone calm and professional, though everyone could feel the tension growing in the air. Amelie stood a few steps away, her emerald gown glimmering under the chandelier, her face calm but her heart steady with purpose. The lawyer continued, reading from a folded sheet of paper. According to the last will of the late Mrs. Nandi Mbeki, he said clearly, her 40% ownership in Mbeki Holdings is to be transferred to her granddaughter, Ms. Amelie Mbeki. The sound of shock spread across the room like thunder. Gasps echoed. A few guests even dropped their glasses. Her father's hand froze midair, the champagne flute slipping from his grasp and shattering into tiny pieces on the marble floor. The sound cut through the silence. Her mother's face turned pale. That can't be right, she stammered, stepping forward. There must be a mistake. Those shares belong to us. But the lawyer raised his hand politely and continued reading. Furthermore, as outlined in the legal documentation and verified by the company board, all voting rights associated with those shares are to shift immediately to Ms. Amelie Mbeki. His words were calm, but they hit harder than any shout. Her father's lips trembled. This is impossible, he muttered, looking around as if someone would save him. Her mother tried to argue, but the lawyer simply handed them copies of the document. Every page carried official seals and signatures, all in perfect order. There was no loophole, no escape. Amelie stood still, watching the people who had once called her a burden crumble under the truth. 6 months ago, they had mocked her, thrown her out, and laughed at her pain. Now they stood in front of her, powerless. Her father's face was red with disbelief. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. The crowd whispered. Phones clicked. Cameras flashed. Amelie took a deep breath and stepped forward. You see, she said softly, the empire you built was never truly yours. Grandma made sure her legacy went to someone who would honor it, not destroy it with pride. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone with quiet strength. No one dared to speak. The lawyer closed his folder and stepped aside. Amelie turned toward the audience, gave a calm smile, and walked down the stage. In that moment, the power her parents had used to control her slipped through their fingers completely. The same family that once cut her off was now watching their daughter become everything they said she could never be. The night after the announcement, the city buzzed with news about Amelie Mbeki, the young woman who had taken back her grandmother's company from her own parents. Reporters filled the streets outside her hotel, flashes of cameras lighting up the night. But inside her quiet suite on the top floor, Amelie sat alone by the window, looking out at Nairobi's skyline. She felt no rush of victory, just a deep, calm silence. She had done what she needed to do. Hours passed before she heard a soft knock at the door. For a moment, she thought it might be her assistant, but when she opened it, she froze. It was her parents. The same people who had once laughed as they cut her off now stood before her, looking nothing like the powerful Mbekis she had known. Her father's shoulders were slumped, and her mother's eyes were red and swollen from crying. They entered the room quietly. For the first time, her father didn't command the space. He didn't speak down to her. He didn't even look her in the eye at first. Then, slowly, he dropped to his knees. Amelie's breath caught in her throat. This man, so proud, so unbending, was kneeling. His voice trembled as he said, "Amelie, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have treated you that way. Please, don't destroy the company. Don't destroy what we built." Her mother wiped her tears and whispered, "You're our daughter. We were angry, we didn't mean it. Please forgive us." Amelie didn't answer right away. She just looked at them, her heart torn between the little girl who once begged for their love and the woman who had learned to live without it. She walked over to the table, where a folder lay open. From it, she pulled out 2 papers and placed them gently in front of them. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "You cut me off on my birthday," she said, her eyes steady. "Now, I'm cutting you off from everything." Her father frowned, confused. He picked up one of the papers and froze. It was a resignation letter, his. The other one was her mother's. Both already signed, ready for submission. Her father's lips parted, but no words came out. Her mother started to cry again. Amelie stood up, her face calm but her heart heavy. "You taught me that family means nothing without money. But Grandma taught me that legacy means everything. I'm choosing her lesson, not yours." Her parents sat there in silence, realizing there was no argument left, no pride to hide behind. When they finally stood to leave, her father turned back one last time. His voice broke as he said, "We're sorry." Amelie simply nodded. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had already won, not by power, but by peace. The next morning, Amelie sat in her new office at Mbeki Holdings. The city stretched beneath her, tall buildings glowing under the morning sun. The same office that once belonged to her father was now hers, but instead of feeling proud or hungry for revenge, she just felt calm. She had everything she thought she wanted, the power, the title, the respect, but the bitterness she had carried for months began to fade. She thought about the night her parents humiliated her, about the sleepless nights on Zuri's couch, about her grandmother's soft voice telling her to be kind even when the world wasn't. And she realized something: revenge would only make her like them. So instead of selling the company or forcing her parents into ruin, Amelie made a different choice. She called a meeting with her board members and spoke with quiet confidence. "We're changing everything," she said. "From today, Mbeki Holdings will not just be about profits. It will be about purpose." The board members exchanged confused looks, but Amelie continued. "We will create a foundation under my grandmother's name, the Nandi Foundation. It will support young women who've been abandoned, rejected, or silenced by their families, just like I was." There was silence in the room for a moment, and then one of the senior members nodded slowly. "That's powerful," he said. Amelie smiled faintly. "It's what Grandma would have wanted." Over the next few weeks, news of the foundation spread across Nairobi. Headlines flashed everywhere: Mbeki Holdings under new leadership focused on legacy, not ego. People admired the young woman who turned pain into purpose, who chose grace instead of revenge. The same media that once ignored her now celebrated her strength and compassion. One morning, her father sat at the breakfast table of the now quiet mansion. He picked up the newspaper and saw her face on the front page. She was smiling, standing beside a group of young women holding certificates from the Nandi Foundation. The headline caught his breath. He read it twice, his vision blurring. "Legacy, not ego," he whispered under his breath. His hand trembled as he folded the paper. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: shame, but also pride. Her mother entered the room quietly, her face tired but soft. "She did it," she said, her voice breaking. Her father nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. "She saved the company," he whispered. "She saved us all." Back in her office, Amelie looked out the window, watching the city move below her. The empire that once stood as a symbol of her family's pride had become something greater, a symbol of grace, resilience, and love. Her grandmother's picture sat on her desk, smiling as if proud. Amelie touched the frame gently and whispered, "We did it, Grandma. We turned pain into power." A year later, on the morning of her 26th birthday, Amelie sat by the window of her glass-walled office, watching the sunrise paint the Nairobi skyline in gold. The world outside was busy, but her heart was quiet. The company that had once been ruled by arrogance now thrived under her calm and honest leadership. Becky Holdings had grown stronger, not because of power or money, but because people finally believed in its purpose. Every corner of the office carried her grandmother's spirit, graceful, kind, and unshakable. Her assistant walked in with a warm smile, holding a small envelope. "This just arrived, ma'am," she said softly. Amelie took it and opened it slowly. Inside was a simple birthday card. The handwriting was familiar, her parents'. The message was short but heavy with meaning, "We're proud of you." For a long moment, Amelie just stared at the words. The same people who once told her she was a burden now lived off the very empire they had tried to take from her. But she didn't feel bitterness anymore, only peace. She placed the card on her desk and smiled faintly. "Tell them," she said gently, "I signed one paper, and that was the day I was reborn." Her assistant nodded, not asking what she meant. Amelie turned back toward the city, the light catching the gold pendant around her neck, her grandmother's. That single document, the one that had once shattered her family's pride, had also set her free. She didn't win with revenge or hate. She won in silence, through strength, grace, and forgiveness. And as she looked out at the bright city below, Amelie finally felt it, she had become everything they said she could never be.